Drew, do you have that hard hat in the background? I think it's a good time to put it on as we talk about how Alabama built this, right? And it's a little bit of a two-sided coin here because, well, since the team talent composite over at 24/7 Sports has been in existence for over a decade, Alabama has been number one in that regard for 8 out of the 10 years. So first of all, let's give our respect to the GOAT, Nick Saban, right? He's got a piece in this, but we got to give some love to Kalen DeBoer as well. Drew, I think you're going to take the macro approach. I'll take the micro approach. Tell me what you like so far about what Kalen DeBoer has done with this roster.
Well, Coop, I think it's the coaches that are coaching up the roster and the people inside that building. Yes, we can get into some transfer portal additions, some of these freshmen that have stepped up. But I think the guys that are pulling the strings behind the scenes have kind of been the difference so far through the first month and a half of the season, and really the first 6 months of Kalen DeBoer's tenure. I was watching the game on Saturday night with someone I would describe as a casual, and they turned to me and they said, "How many coaches are holdovers from Nick Saban's staff?" And I said, "That's a great question because there's only 2 of them. This isn't a new face running the old show. This is a completely different program." And Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, you can make the case that he called an excellent game, especially there in the first half. That was a sitting head coach at South Alabama. They pair him with Freddie Roach, who was already there in Tuscaloosa on the D-line. Offensive side of the ball, Robert Gillespie, the running back coach. That's a holdover. And Cooper, what really stood out to me about Alabama, and this is saying a lot, just given that Georgia was the team on the other sideline, I thought they looked big, man. Maybe I've just been watching some low level of football, but I thought they looked big. I thought they looked athletic. I mean, we just talked about Xavier Brown in the freshman flowers segment. I went back and looked. Xavier Brown, when he showed up to the All-American Bowl there in San Antonio, 176 pounds. Alabama lists him at 196. That's a kid that's only been in Tuscaloosa for a few semesters now. And really, I think that strength program, Kalen DeBoer was able to retain a lot of people in that department. And he also brought with him who I think is kind of a under-the-radar individual, Ron McCaffrey, over from Washington. These two guys go really, really far back. McCaffrey has trained U.S. Special Forces in the past. He was huge in the role of Michael Penix's development at Washington. I've been heard, that DeBoer describes him as a culture guy. I think his official title is the special assistant to the head coach. So to me, I just love what he has done in terms of resetting that building, creating new expectations, and those guys are getting the team ready to go, and we saw it on Saturday night.
I agree with you with the physical element part of this. LT Overton, the former 5-star who transferred over from Texas A&M, looks like a completely different human being just in terms of the amount of weight that he's put on. Jaquavius Rousseau as well, one of those talented young pass rushers that we've seen make a difference. The physicality of this team, especially defensively. We talked about Xavier Brown. How about Mbakwe? He barely played defensive back out of high school for 3 years. Now he's ready to play. Red Morgan, I mentioned him earlier in the show. That's relying on a lot of youth in a big-time moment, and this is only going to serve them so much better down the road for being able to get this type of experience. So I love that because, Drew, for us, the teams that we have studied in this segment in the past have been Tennessee, have been Texas. We looked at Georgia Tech, but the two I really want to talk about, Tennessee and Texas. And the reason that I bring that up, you're starting to see a theme here, right? Some of the best recruiting teams in the country from a talent identification standpoint. Tennessee is starting to prove their chops over the last 3 years under Josh Heupel. How about Alabama, what they've done? And you mentioned the continuity as well. I think that's such a big part of it with the coaching staff. Obviously, you got new staff coming over from Washington, but to be able to retain 2 highly heralded head coaches, your strength and conditioning department there as well, you get a little bit of consistency. Now, Drew, in terms of getting into the weeds and the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes, I mean, let's talk about the quarterback position. You have the franchise guy there. We talked about that in Texas with Quinn Ewers. We talked about it in Tennessee with Nico. How about Jalen Milroe, man? This guy has been special, and I think Kalen DeBoer has gotten the most out of him through 5 weeks, the most that we've seen in his career. 18 games started, 29 games played. You like the quarterback situation a lot. Jalen Milroe has been one of those guys that we saw benched a year ago against South Florida respond not only last year, but he has gotten better and better week over week under Kalen DeBoer. That is what you have to have at that quarterback position. Jalen Milroe just makes that makes Alabama that much more difficult to defend. Running back position, two former top 247 guys in Jamarian Miller, Justice Haynes. You bring in a couple transfers over at tight end. Receiver, Drew, this was kind of the big question marks. Obviously, we have seen the emergence of the young superstar in Ryan Williams, but what would the rest kind of look like? Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, Jeremy Bernard, they bring over from Washington, Cole Adams. We saw Emmanuel Henderson, the former running back, make a play. They've done a good job putting this room together. Hats off to Jamarcus Shepard. I'm interested to kind of see what that room looks like in the future. I think the biggest thing maybe that we haven't talked about, getting Caden Proctor back is so huge and such a underlying storyline to this Alabama offense in 2024, because if you don't have him, that's probably Elijah Pritchard at left tackle. Wilkin Formby struggled earlier in the season at right tackle. This thing doesn't work. But now that you have your corner protector back, Alabama's got a combined 67 starts there. They're rock solid in the middle. Parker Brailsford comes over from Washington, was part of a unit that won the Joe Moore Award last year. And then you have Jaden Roberts, steady as they go, and Tyler Booker, who's going to be a day 1, day 2 draft pick, right? So that offensive line deserves a lot of credit, but they have been super dynamic. They haven't missed a beat. And I don't know, Drew, you talked about it before the show. Like, is this a team that was is more difficult to defend under Kalen DeBoer offensively, or what did it look like just a year ago, right, under Nick Saban? So that's fascinating as well. I don't know if you have any takes on the offensive side of the football, but it just seems to me that experience on the offensive line, that those dynamic playmakers on the perimeter, and then you got the quarterback that makes it go.
Coop, tying this back in full circle, right? I said the coaching staff. I think you hit the nail on the head right there with Jalen Milroe playing his best football. I mean, this staff, what they were able to do at Michael Penix. Michael Penix was someone who saw the field at Indiana, struggled, shows up in Seattle, and they turn him into a Heisman Trophy finalist, a quarterback that can lead them to the promised land. So I think that staff and what they've done with Jalen Milroe. Cooper, he wasn't sacked on Saturday night, threw for a career-high 376 yards, and it was his highest graded game as a passer, according to PFF. He was in his bag, and I think Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, that offensive coordinator, certainly deserves some credit. The other two things that stand out to me, you said it, Ryan Williams, he has been the go-to playmaker for them, and I think a lot of college football fans assume that Kalen DeBoer inherited Ryan Williams, and that was not the case. Ryan Williams actually backed off a commitment to the Crimson Tide once Nick Saban announced that he was retiring. Kalen DeBoer had to reel him in, and I think one of the big pitches is, hey, look at what I was able to do with these wide receivers at Washington. Same thing with Caden Proctor. Caden Proctor was at Iowa, and they find a way to get him back there in Tuscaloosa. We had some questions about Kalen DeBoer, the recruiter, but so far, so good. I mean, our buddy Tom Loy was in Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday night. You see him tweeting out the videos of Keelan Russell and that number 2 ranked recruiting class celebrating after that Ryan Williams touchdown. I think exciting time.
Yeah, Drew, just real quick, the other thing I want to hit on is really what Alabama has been able to do defensively as well. You talk about Xavier Brown and Bakwe, those young corners, what they've done on the defensive line. We've talked about the experience on the offensive line. It also matters on the defensive line as well. Jahad Campbell, you can make an argument. Maybe this guy's playing out of place. A lot of people saw him as a pass rusher coming out of high school. I think this is a guy that's got a chance to potentially go day 1 as well. So Kalen DeBoer, his staff, give them a lot of credit for what they've done as Alabama off to an undefeated start. Schedule only gets a little bit more difficult from here. Alabama, how they built this, the team of the week for us at the 105. Guys, stick around as we'll get into a couple more segments right after this.